expectations about an accelerator were actually framed a lot from my experience within Silicon Valley, as well as my co-founders. We've been around a lot of different people who've been part of the Silicon Valley accelerator culture and ecosystem. And what we found is that it was just something where you could have this boot camp and this really intense training session where it pushes a brand and a company to be better and stronger. And one of the key things that we were looking for was actually being part of those Silicon Valley accelerators. And what we found incredibly surprising was by joining Canopy, a very cannabis-specific accelerator was actually much more helpful than the experiences that we had had previously. It was just fantastic because there are so many nuances specific to this industry that aren't going to be covered by those. And so we were really incredibly surprised and happy to be part of an industry-specific accelerator.
So when we first encountered Patrick and thought about potentially entering into the CanopyBoulder Accelerator, there were a couple of things that stood out to us as potential benefits of joining the program. First off, we were both first-time entrepreneurs, me and my co-founder. We had never started a company before, nor had we really even had experience in early-stage companies. We both come out of the corporate world, having worked for only really a year after graduating from college. So we felt that not only would this be a great entree into the startup world with a little bit of guidance and a little bit more structure, but we were also entering into a totally new and totally foreign industry to us, which is the cannabis industry. The complexities of the market and the peccadillos of the people that work in it were something that we had no experience with. We had no network, and we had no ability to enter into the market. So we felt that the CanopyBoulder Accelerator and the massive amount of experience that they have in the industry would be so helpful to us in getting our idea off the ground and really understanding what it is that we could do to help people out and create a tool that was actually useful.
I think we had been petering along for a little while in San Francisco, knocking down doors, really getting into stuff ourselves. But, the three of us kind of came from outside the industry originally, although we've now been involved since 2017. But, one thing we noticed very quickly is that everything in this industry is about relationships, right? That's true most industries, but particularly with something coming out of the black market. So we were keen on thinking, what we really need is a strategic investor in something like an accelerator program that's industry focused to kind of basically catapult us from being kind of on the sidelines to being in the middle. And I think that was a key part of that, and primarily from a investment side and a sales side as well.
The ecosystem I would divide maybe into three pieces. The first piece of the ecosystem is the sort of nuclear community of Canopy, which is the entrepreneurs and the operators of Canopy, Patrick, Celia, Micah, and other members of that team. We really leaned a lot on the community of entrepreneurs and operators who are actually a part of the day-to-day life of Canopy because they're such a great emotional support and they have so much experience in the case of the operators themselves with other companies who have been through the same challenges, have had the same failures or the same successes, and they're able to really drive us towards places that we should be going and help us to avoid the classic pitfalls that they've seen time and time again.
And having a platform in the ArcView stage and in the ArcView network, I think also helped a lot with that and connecting to, I like to call them cannabis kingmakers, just individuals who have legacy knowledge of the industry, who have done tons of things, who get an interest in you. They're angel investors or they're angel advisors. They get an interest in you, and then all of a sudden you're talking to tons of different people that you would never have expected to talk to. So, yeah.
By day two, when we went through the Mentor Madness program, again, we've been as a company, we were so focused and, almost had created our own echo chamber in which we were speaking to one another, that having Mentor Madness, where we essentially engaged with 80 industry leaders in the course of one night, enabled us to actually get product market fit feedback pretty much immediately within 2 to 3 hours, which again is invaluable when you're building a technology product that's serving a very specific industry and need. And in addition to that, all the mentors that we connected with there, we've now continued relationships with them. They have been incredibly helpful. And I think this again is a credit to CanopyBoulder overall, not just again in that curriculum development, but in the community that it creates. I think the fact that, Canopy supports founders that it's had in cohort cohorts previously who now come back and can offer help to the newer cohorts has been incredibly special. I think, from a formal perspective, as far as what was really impactful for us was actually a lot of the course curriculum, but actually one of the key things was when Canopy pivoted to just address the fact that people were no longer necessarily coming into the office, but still creating environments for us to actually ask and connect with investors and ask key questions about not only what they were looking for from an investment perspective, but also what they were seeing in the industry and how we could essentially address some of those needs. That was incredibly helpful. And because those experiences were much more intimate, where we were able to have these conversations with investors, a lot of our questions were answered, as well as, again, even just some of the feedback that the investors gave us pushed us to be stronger companies, especially during something like COVID-19.
Pitch practice, although sometimes can feel a little like, okay, like this is long, like what am I getting at? Cracking the nut on that was incredibly impactful. Right. And that harkens back to I have this theater background that I have. And there was always a time in a show, a production of a play at which you crack the character, right? At which you basically you get it and you get the emotional quality of that character. And all of a sudden you live that character's experience. You're not trying to recite lines. You're actually feeling and doing that. Cracking the pitch, I think, is very analogous to that. And I think that moment, that impactful moment where after you pitched it again and again and again, and you've iterated again and again and again, and then finally you're up there and you're doing the practice again, and this time you just see the eyes open up and you hear all the Q&A and you're bang, 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 right? That feeling of okay, I've made it, I get it, I now can pitch this, and I now can go out. Obviously, you always have to work on it more, but I think that was a very impactful, deep moment that I had personally.
For us, the culmination of our cohort was the ArcView Investor Forum, which perhaps a thing of the past was an in-person event where we pitched in front of a huge forum of cannabis-focused angel investors. And we'd been working on our pitch for that for quite some time, and it competed to qualify for that event, and had ultimately made it to the main stage and pitched in front of the largest audience that I had ever spoken to, and were quite successful. We ended up winning the competition, and that was one of the biggest pieces of momentum for us driving through to being able to close out our angel round.
Where our product is software that we sell into dispensary retailers, but we're also very focused on moving up the vertical, right? And so getting conversations immediately with some prominent retailers in Colorado was helpful. But I think a huge thing was getting those partnership conversations going as well. Basically other software providers who are going after the same thing we're trying to go after, that are synergistic. I hate that word, but are synergistic to our offering. A lot of our growth has been going to market with folks together, hand in hand. And Canopy gets you rapidly to introduce you to a ton of people, and you basically are you're working on that thing, I'm working on this thing. That's perfect. Let's work together because it's a fractured landscape.
The company, when we entered the accelerator, was quite literally an idea that we had written down on paper, a little more than a name. So when we grew the business through Canopy, it was really building the business from the ground up. We were not only in the ideation stages of figuring out exactly what the problem was that we were trying to solve and what the customer base of that potential problem could be into the future in both cannabis and beyond. But we also had to get out of the way some of the really foundational pieces of building a company, like finding legal support, finding accounting support, figuring out your pro formas and getting everything ready for potentially bringing investors on board. So the company really grew from zero to our MVP product, which we launched near the end of the accelerator. And ultimately through that, we were able to raise an angel round that supported us into our V1 launch. And 2 years and change later, we're raising our seed round and are supported by a number of venture capitalists and angel investors, a lot of whom came from that CanopyBoulder community.
And the numbers speak for themselves. We did 3x, something like that, MRR growth in the time we were in the program. And a large number of that, if you look at our existing pipeline, and our existing customers, like a huge amount of that was from either strategies we developed while in the program, realizing certain things we had to achieve from the program helped crystallize how does the valuations work in the industry, what kind of numbers do we need to be hitting in order to be successful, what does success look like, and getting those numbers for me personally led me back into a strategy of how to get them. And we're in Ohio and Colorado, we weren't before, purely because of connections we made through the program. And our focus on how to build out our sales channel, I think. Although I wouldn't say that necessarily the program explicitly said how to build a sales channel, I have enough sales background, but really crystallized the numbers of what we need to get to, which helped us home headed. So yeah, no, I mean, we've had tremendous growth through it.
From a personal perspective, I always joke around now when people ask me about my experience with Canopy. And in the very beginning, I really hated having to watch recordings of myself pitch. I really hated the idea of even just hearing my own voice recorded. But one of the great things about Canopy is that, again, pushing us to pitch every single week, going through that program, going through, what sometimes felt really challenging personally, and having people create a safe environment where, yes, there's going to be critique and there's going to be pushes for us to get better, for us to be stronger founders, but at the same time in a really safe place for us to do that. And so now I'm happy to report that as far as, talking about our product, talking about our platform, talking about what we're doing to address the needs of our industry is something that I'm 100% comfortable with now. The reality is the fact that Canopy is so proactive about engaging its community, engaging its former cohort members has been so helpful to us. These are really challenging times. As much as the cannabis industry is seeing growth during this time, what that growth looks like is impacting us companies differently. And having someone like Patrick and Celia check in on us regularly, making sure that we have the support tools that we need. And again, all the things that we benefited during the actual cohort experience, the same things like posing questions that push us to think outside the box, creating a support environment, connecting us with investors or connecting us with other companies that may be aligned with some of the work that we're doing. All of those things have not stopped at all since our cohort has graduated or since the advent of COVID-19.
So Canopy has been a big part of our lives even after the cohort ended. A part of that is obviously that we ended up staying in Boulder, and our office is right down the street from Canopy. So we've had a lot of face-to-face interactions, but also a lot of calls, a lot of video chats with the team over at Canopy over the past couple of years. Also, Canopy has been a huge support to us on an onward-looking basis from a fundraising perspective. Their network has always been open to us, and Patrick has given us massive amount of referrals out to different investors, many of whom have actually ended up investing in the company. So that's been really helpful to us as we've been continuing to build up more funding rounds. Patrick also has been a real supporter to us just from a strategic and a thought partnership perspective. He really helped us understand how we can improve the business through time, has kept us abreast of what he's learning about the cannabis industry every day, and has always been helpful as a reference for others who want to know more about us and feel that they can be confident because Patrick's recommendation comes with a lot of weight. Similarly, we've always had access to the ecosystem of mentors still after Canopy, and the events and various other ways that we can interact with them through the Canopy ecosystem still sort of helps us to maintain a connection with the cannabis industry and make sure that we are always abreast of what's going on. So that's a really huge piece for us, is that Canopy is always at the forefront. So even just by checking in with them, once every month, we can learn a little bit more about what's happening in the industry and where it's going. So that's been really helpful to us as well.